Good morning to all of you. And today we will discuss uh, role of legumes in crop rotations or role of crop rotations. So, if you remember, in one of the lecture we have seen that soil fertility management is very important, and soil fertility has declined. There is no doubt about it. Our soils are becoming poor in soil fertility day by day. So we need to manage soil fertility. The first option for management was identify the problems related to soil fertility. We discussed that we should see what are the problems that are stopping soil from supplying the nutrients. Why it is not able to supply the nutrient? Is it deficiency? Is it physical property, chemical property? We need to find out the reason. Then we can go for soil testing and then apply corrective measures as per the problem. And the most important aspect in soil fertility management is balanced fertilization and integrated nutrient management. So in both integrated nutrient management as well as balanced fertilization and also in biofertilizers, these crop rotations play a very important role. If you want to get good response from legumes, you should fit them in the rotations. You can use biofertilizers with the legume. So therefore, this crop rotations are very important. So today we are going to discuss role of crop rotations in soil fertility management, how they are important in soil fertility management, not only in fertility management, but also we will see how they are important in disease prevention, insect pest disease control, or maybe weed control also. So we'll see the overall we will learn from this lecture that why there is what is the meaning of crop rotation, why there is need, the value or the importance of crop rotations and their advantages. And of course, it may be just revision for agronomy student, but a student from soil science and other disciplines will benefit more from this lecture. We'll also see what are the planning considerations when we include legumes in the rotation. So, friends, I start with monoculture. Monoculture, I think it is kind of continuous cropping, growing similar kind of crop year after year. Rice after rice, rice after rice, this is monoculture. Similarly, I consider rice wheat also as a kind of monoculture because both these only two crops are repeated year after year. However, most of the rotations are cereal based. And if we continuously take one kind of crop, there are so many problems. Continuously growing just one kind of crop. So definitely you will have more incidence of insect pests and disease. And in this case, it is easy to understand that diseases is spread from crop residues or from roots. So then the residues, some part of the plants will remain in the soil. And when next time you grow the same crop, these insect pest disease will infest such crop more. Continuously taking same kind of crop also give you more weed pressure because weeds that survive under these conditions are actually getting favorable conditions, so they multiply very fast, so they get ideal conditions, and generally the weed pressure is much more in monoculture system. Also economic risk, if you have just one kind of crop and there is some problem, some environmental problem, some biotic stress, any kind of stress, then whole crop will be wiped out and farmers will not have any income. But instead of one crop, if you have two crops, three crops, or more crops, then economic risk is minimized. Also, there are a lot of soil fertility problems because same kind of crop, just growing one kind of crop year after year, it will remove, it will love to have a certain essential nutrient in more quantities. For example, if you grow potato, it likes to have more of potassium. So every year more potassium will be removed. Similarly, cereal crops, they love not just potassium, they also love to remove nitrogen. So more nitrogen, more this potassium will be removed. So soil fertility problems also come, and further your roots are on the same depth. So a particular section of the soil will be exhausted from the nutrients. However, in other sections where the roots are not going into the soil profile that will remain unutilized. So therefore, soil fertility problems also come by not adopting crop rotations, by just going by a single kind of crop. Now, opposite of monoculture, now what is the option? The option is that you go for multiple cropping. Multiple cropping means growing two or more different kind of crops in a year is multiple cropping. In this case, you can take two crops, three crops in a year, but these crops should be different from each other. So what happens in multiple cropping? Your economic risk is spread. You have two, three, four crops. So if one crop is damaged, farmer will get income from some other crop. Also reduced incidence of insect pest and disease. If you follow rotations, if you diversify your cropping system, then incidence of insect pest and also weed decreases. And if you have three, four kind of crop, their operations are spread over a longer period, or rather whole year, farmer will get something to do. There may be sowing of one crop, harvesting of another crop, or maybe weed management in another crop. So farmer will get regular employment if we go for multiple cropping. So overall, we have seen that monoculture is not good. So multiple culture or multiple cropping is better. So there are two kind of multiple cropping system. One is sequential cropping. Sequential cropping means taking different crops in sequence in the same field is your sequential cropping. It is also known as crop rotation. Here rotation means you are changing the crop one after other. That is your crop rotation. Crop rotation you can make for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years or so on. Similarly, intercropping means growing of two crops together in the same at the same time in the same piece of land. That is your intercropping. Here, the basic purpose is to utilize the space left in the widely spaced crop, the interrow space between two rows. If they are wider, you can grow some intercrops. There are many examples farmers have adopted intercropping under certain conditions. So both these systems, rotation as well as intercropping system, are kind of multiple cropping system. So let us see in detail what is crop rotation. Is a planned sequence of growing different crops in the same field. It is just sequence of crops. Rotations are the opposite of the continuous cropping, which is growing the same crop in the same field year after year. Ideally, crops are not of the same family. Means they should be different kind of crops. They should not belong to same kind of family. Their nature should be different. Their nutrient requirements should be different, and so on. So these are the this is the meaning of the crop rotation. Now, why there is a need to go for crop rotation? There are certain objectives of crop rotation. These objectives are: one is to improve soil condition and health. These crop rotations are going to improve your soil conditions. They are going to improve your soil health. I discussed in detail, if you have above ground biodiversity, I repeatedly say, if you have more above ground biodiversity, more different kind of plant, more number of plant, more variety of plant on the top of the soil, so will be the case inside the soil, beneath the soil, below the soil. You will have variety of organisms which are mostly useful, and they also suppress the disease causing organism within the soil by the process of antibiosis. So soil conditions improve, physical, chemical, and biological, all conditions improve by adopting the crop rotations. To reduce the average rate of erosion, most of the time in crop rotations, it is recommended to include legume. At least one legume should be included in a year. Generally speaking, at least if not possible, then in 2 years, one legume should be included in the crop rotation. So this legume acts as a cover crop, and the soil erosion is reduced if you have variety of crops in your field. To reduce the fertilizer need, sometimes, as I just told you, that if you have legume in the rotation, it is definitely going to reduce the nitrogen requirement of the succeeding crop. It is most of the time crop rotations are the integral part of integrated pest management. The strategy of IPM also includes prominently these crop rotations. Weeds can be controlled. For example, there are many classical examples of weed management by following crop rotations. One simple experience and knowledge is that if you grow legumes in the cropping system, legumes in the crop rotation, then it definitely reduces the weed growth, weeds in the succeeding crop. If you have rice wheat system, and Phalaris minor is a common weed in rice wheat system which affects the wheat crop. So if you, instead of wheat in one season, if you take barsim, in one season you take barsim, then rice wheat. So in next wheat, there will not be any incidence of Phalaris minor. So it happens, and also in barsim itself, there will not be any Phalaris minor. So maybe some allelopathic effect kind of things also happen because of crop rotations, because of changing the crops, and it also increase the nutrient use efficiency. The crop rotations also increase or improve the nutrient use efficiency. You would surprise why it is increasing nutrient use efficiency. For the simple reason that your physical, chemical, and biological properties are improved by following crop rotations. If your properties are improved, then definitely your nutrient use efficiency will increase. Means nutrients will be available in sufficient quantity, and the growth of the plant will be good if you follow crop rotations. Therefore, nutrient use efficiency will increase. Also, organic matter levels are also enhanced because legumes are integral part of any crop rotation. So, organic matter levels also enhance, and water use efficiency because of increased organic matter content in soil by adopting crop rotations. So, water use efficiency also increases. Now we will see the advantages of or value, why they are important from different perspective. We can see in detail, like from the perspective of plant nutrition, how they are important, insect control, disease control, or weed control, or water quality. By adopting water quality, by adopting crop rotations, we actually improve the quality of the air, quality of the water. So overall, crop rotations improve structural stability of the soil, increase water use efficiency, soil organic matter level. These are advantages of the crop rotations. Now, if we see in detail from the perspective of plant nutrition, how these crop rotations are important. So in this case, you can see each crop uses different types and amounts of minerals from the soil. Means some crop will prefer to remove more of silicon. Of course, silicon is non-essential but beneficial element. The cereal crops will remove more of silicon from the soil. Similarly, oilseed crop or legumes may not remove that much silicon from the soil. So each crop will prefer certain specific nutrient. Leguminous crop will not prefer much of nitrogen. They will like to have more of phosphorus, more of sulfur. Similarly, oilseed crop, they will prefer to remove more of sulfur. So if we have variety of crops, then the nutrient removal will be uniform. It is not that only one or two nutrients will be exploited more. So uh, the nutrients will be exploited or removed by the crops in balanced ratios if we have crop rotations, if we have different kind of crops. Different crops replenish different minerals. Similarly, crops definitely they take up nutrients from the soil, but some crops also give back certain amount of nutrient to the soil by way of their roots, by way of their shedding the leaves. Some crops shed their leaves, so they replenish some minerals, because you see leguminous crop can go deeper into the soil, and in the deeper part of the soil you have certain nutrients. Those kind of nutrients are sitting idle. They are of no use because you are, suppose you are growing just shallow rooted crops. So only nutrients will be removed from the shallower layer of the soil, maybe 15, 20 centimeter, 20 centimeter, and nutrients which are lying beyond 20 centimeter may not be useful to the crop if it is shallow rooted. But if we take the deep rooted crop in the rotation, it will extract the nutrients which are beyond the reach of the shallow rooted crop. So that way it will bring back the nutrients which were lost it can bring back, and also some missing minerals can be brought back to the surface. Because then if you add the residue of these crops, so they have extracted nutrients from the deeper layer, and those nutrients have become body part of the plant. They are in the leaves, they are in the stem. If you plow back these, or if you put back the residues of such crop, then mineral will come from deeper layer to the topsoil, and that will be used by the next crop. So that way, these crop rotations are helpful in replenishing the minerals. And soil structure is also improved because of improved soil structure. The nutrient availability increases, the nutrient uptake increases, and effectiveness of rotation at boosting soil fertility depends on the legume. Inclusion of legume is very, very important if you want to take more advantage of crop rotations. Now, question comes how to rotate the crop. What principles should be followed? I think agronomy student understand that leguminous crop should be taken after the non-legume crop. Less water requiring crops should be taken after the more water requiring crops. Crops of the same family should not be taken. These are the general principles of crop rotation. Crops which suffer from similar kind of insect pests disease should not be followed, should not follow each other. So that is how some principles of crop rotations are there. So here we will discuss certain planning consideration in rotations. So crop should be rotated on at least 3 to 4 cycles. Meaning is that one particular crop should come in the rotation once in 3 years or once in 4 years. That is the meaning. Rotation of 3 to 4 year cycle means one crop should come only once in 3 years or 4 years. So crop should be rotated on at least a 3 to 4 year cycle. A crop of maize planted this year is not planted in the same field for the next 2 or 3 years. So that is the rotation. Ideally, altogether different crops should be used each year, as insect and disease that affect one crop will also likely affect similar crops. For example, cabbage and broccoli have the same common insect is there, and they belong to same family. Uh, what is the name of the insect which affect cauliflower more severely?
DBM.
Cabbage. Eh? Hello.
DBM.
Diamond black mold, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Diamond.
Diamond Blackmon.
yeah. So it can affect both cabbage as well as broccoli. Crops are changed year after year in plant sequence. Now, another consideration is that legumes are generally a beneficial preceding crops. So, most of the time, for example, if you take rice in Kharif crop, you go for green manuring of legumes. So, legumes are generally a preceding crop. When legumes are used in a rotation, nitrogen formed by whatever nitrogen is fixed by the legume should be considered for recommending the nitrogen requirement of the succeeding crop. Whatever it has contributed, that should be considered. For example, in case of rice, if you take leguminous crop as a green manure crop, Dhencha or Sesbania, then 60 kg nitrogen can be saved in rice. Suppose rice for nitrogen requirement is 120. If you have taken a leguminous crop, green manure crop, then you need to apply 60 kg less nitrogen than the recommended. So this is very useful. Soil fertility levels should be regularly monitored and fertility maintained with the acceptable range. We farmers should take care of the fertility continuously after harvest of each crop. And crop residues should be recycled back so that fertility is maintained. And now the another important part is, as I told you, that legumes are the most important part of any crop rotation if you want sustainability. So what they are doing, I think every student understand that they add nitrogen in the soil, and they also increase phosphorus and potassium availability, and also micronutrient availability, because after decomposition of legumes, in many cases, legumes are shedding their leaves on the surface, say pigeon pea, sometimes moong also. There may be, and one can mix the residues into the soil. After picking the pods, one can mix these residues in the soil, and then they decompose and they release certain organic acid which solubilize the nutrients. So overall, it has been observed that if you have legume in the rotation, the availability of phosphorus, potassium, and micronutrients and also nitrogen increases in the soil. They also reduce the disease and pest problem in the next crops. So they also control the weeds. I have told you these leguminous crops are important in controlling the weeds. And this is very small part. I wanted to highlight the value of crop rotations, particularly including the legumes in the rotation. If you want that your fertility should be sustainable, then we should adopt crop rotations. We should not go for monoculture. And in crop rotations, we should try to include legumes as far as possible. So that is the main conclusion of this, that they crop rotations are always required. See, I tell you the case of Punjab. In Punjab, in 70s or 60s, farmers were growing about 14 crops. 1/4. Farmers were growing 14 crops in whole Punjab. But now they are growing just 6 crops. You see, 6 crops. Only 6 crops are they are growing. If you go 100 years back, our farmers may have been growing 100 different kind of crops. So many crops have become extinct. You can say extinct from the field. They are not growing. If you go to this part around Delhi in Western UP, in 90% of the land you will just find sugar cane. Go to Punjab, it is rice, wheat, rice, wheat. Go to any part of India now, crop diversification or adoption of crop rotation has declined. They are not following crop rotations. The diversification level has reduced, and specialized farming is being done. It is really not good for soil and not good for environment and not good for human health also. See, one day our Prime Minister was speaking that if we want to have farmers want to have more income, they should go for coarse cereals, certain fine cereals, millets, small millets, kodo, sawa. There are 8 or 10 kind of millets which we have forgotten, and the nutrient requirement of those millets was very small and their value was rich. They were, now people are calling them cereal, something like that. They are nutritious. They call cereals. So, and nutrient requirement is less. They are rich in nutrients, and they do not consume. They do not over exploit your fertility. So, we need to diversify the system. We need variety of crops if we want good fertility of the soil. So that is my conclusion. And if you have any question on crop rotation, or you can ask, or role of legumes, or role of crop rotation.
Sir, is there any difference between the two terms, monoculture and monocropping?
See, monocropping means
Not audible.
Not audible, sir. Sir, please unmute your audio.
It is not audible.
okay. I think how it is happening. I didn't do anything. Maybe somebody did it by accident. Anyway, so he asked a question that what is the difference in monocropping and monoculture? Monocropping means growing one crop in a year. And every year farmers are taking one crop in certain areas, dry land and so on. And it is not necessary that they will take same kind of crop year after year, but it is happening. They are taking one crop and that crop is almost same. Means they grow bajra year after year. So that is practically monoculture as well as monocropping. But taking one crop in a year is monocropping. Double cropping means taking two crops, or then multiple cropping, taking more than two crops, something like that. Monoculture means growing same kind of crop year after year. One can grow rice after rice. See, in India, there are areas where we take 2 crops of a rice in a year, 3 crops of a rice in a year. That is monoculture. And I told you that even rice wheat, I consider, it is not, but I consider it as a monoculture because rice and wheat are quite similar in nature. Quite similar in nature. So it is also kind of monoculture. Yes, next. Next question. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, sir.
Is there any disadvantage of legumes or multiple cropping?
See, he is saying that disadvantage of legume in multiple cropping, if there is any disadvantage. See, these days, again, first problem comes with the farmer is the price. If farmers grow legumes and they assume more profit, if farmers are growing legumes means they are doing service to the nation, they are doing service to the soil. But when they go to sell these legumes, they do not get good price. It is happening with the farmers. So this is one limitation. Second limitation that sometimes these pulses are affected by wild animals. In many areas of India which were traditionally growing pulses, this nilgai, many of you must have heard nilgai. Nilgai loves to eat pulses. If you have grown green peas, your green gram or your arhar, any pulse. So in whole India, they are destroying many times, or they are affecting these pulses. In Meerut, in these areas, chickpea was a very common crop, but now farmers do not grow because this wild animal, this nilgai, is also there to eat it. It will not eat wheat, it will not eat sugarcane or other crops, but it loves to eat pulses. This is another thing. And third important thing is that they are very susceptible to waterlogging. In certain areas, if there is too much of rain, which can happen in irrigated areas if you grow it, and then waterlogging may happen. So they are very susceptible to waterlogging. Similarly, these legumes are also very susceptible to disease. Certain disease in green gram, you have yellow mosaic virus. In pigeon pea, you have sterility mosaic. So there are some prominent diseases which also are the negative point for pulses. So these are the 3-4 important negative points for the pulses. Yes.
So insect pests are mostly attracted where there is more nitrogen. So in the cropping system, like cereal and pulses, they will be more attracted towards pulses.
See, you cannot generalize like this. You cannot generalize like this. There are so many. These are very minor issues. With the discussion will go in some other direction. So better we ask some other kind of question. Okay. So otherwise we will spend a lot of time on this. So okay, I start the next part and. How to close it?
Hello, sir.
Yeah, yes, please.
Sir, I have one doubt.
Yes, sure.
Sir, what is the effect of legumes on soil, physical and chemical properties of soil?
See, he is asking that how exactly these legumes are affecting means physical, chemical, and biological property. I told that legumes should be included in the crop rotations, and the main advantage is from their roots. The rooting action is very very important because legumes have taproot, and taproot means they go deeper into the soil. So they act as a tillage. They are doing kind of tillage operation in the soil, and they also the roots will add organic matter into the soil. Of course, other roots will also add organic matter into the soil, but its organic matter will be uniformly distributed. Means in case of shallow rooted crop, it is just in top a very small portion of the soil. But here the rooting action will improve the soil physical properties, means the structure. The root will plow into the soil, so it improves aeration, it improves water holding capacity, it improves organic matter content in the soil. Also by litter fall. Litter fall is also there from certain legumes, and that improve the slightly improve the organic matter content in the soil. Of course, it is not going to happen in one season. It will take 10, 20 seasons to really see their uh, uh, visible impact, to see their visible impact. And it is not just legume, it is, I was speaking about the rotations. I was speaking about the rotations. So then you will have next crop in the rotation, and diversity of the crops, above ground biodiversity will improve the below ground diversity also. So it is not just the effect of legume as such, it is effect of following crop rotations, taking different crops, so they will improve the biological property. And once the biological property is improved, you know, all these properties are interlinked. One is helping the other. One is helping the other. If your biological properties is improved, then your soil structure will improve. And soil structure is the mainstay or master of the soil property, I told you. If we can influence the soil property, your water relations, your microbial growth, your root growth, all will be better. So overall, it is cumulative effect of adopting crop rotations, not just legume. I think, hope I satisfied your query.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So we move to next part, which is principles of soil fertility. So just now we have seen importance of crop rotations in soil fertility management. Now we see the different principles of soil fertility. Principle means certain fundamental guidelines which govern a particular thing. Fundamental or basics. You see, basics are the principles. Another topic that we will cover, crop response to soil fertility or nutrient availability. How crop responds, how it reacts to the availability of nutrients in the soil or variable availability of nutrients in the soil. So learning objective is to learn the three principles of soil fertility and also crop response to soil fertility or nutrient availability. So, friends, we see that there are three fundamental principles of soil fertility. Number one is law of minimum. Number two is principle of synchrony, and number three is principle of nutrient cycling. It is first time I have seen that somebody has given principles of soil fertility. Before 2019, nobody has described that principles of soil fertility exist. So first time I have seen and I am sharing. So there are three fundamental principles they consider for soil fertility. So in this case, the first principle is law of minimum. It was proposed by Liebig in 1840. Many of you know about it. So it has been widely accepted, and it says that the final product, that is maybe growth in terms of growth or yield, is determined by the factor most limiting. The nutrient which is most limiting, the nutrient which is present in least amount, or nutrient which is present in minimum amount, or nutrient which is present in shortest supply, will affect the growth more than the other nutrients. So this is known as law of minimum. So you can see this example by a barrel given by somebody, and you can see the steps. There are different steps, steps of different height, and you can see the quantity of water in the barrel will be determined by the stave which has shortest length, which is the shortest, which is the lowest. So similarly, nutrients also. The nutrient which is present in lowest amount or least amount will decide the use of other nutrients, or will be the main determining factor of growth or yield. This is law of minimum. Barrel is a kind of structure, kind of container where these European people make beer. This barrel they make beer. So you can see in this case, this law can be extended to other growth factors also. So Liebig is spoken only about the nutrients, elements which are essential for plant growth, but this law can be extended to other growth factors. So it is not just nutrient you have seen. There are many factors which limit the growth. So in the beginning, there may be, I have given you long list of factors. It is just to show you some example. You don't take the exact meaning of this. In certain condition, variety may be limiting. You got a poor variety. If you overcome the problem, you get the new variety, high yielding variety. Then pest may be another problem. Then pest may come. You overcome this one also. Then your temperature may become limitation. You can overcome this also. Then water may be limiting. So it will go on. It will go on in crop production system. You have variety of factors that affect the growth. But the factor which is present in minimum, least, will determine the utility of the others. It can be explained in very many ways. Like some people say that strength of the chain is determined by the weakest link. जो सबसे कमजोर लिंक होती है, कड़ी होती है, वो डिटरमाइन करती है स्ट्रेंथ का. For example, there is a road on which only one car can pass. Only one car can pass, and there are 100 cars in the row on the road. So the car which is before you will decide your speed, and in the whole chain, the slowest moving car will determine or decide the speed of the other. So same analogy can be fitted. See this very important picture from Havlin's book. Many of you might be having Havlin's book. So it is on page number 12, 8th edition. So this shows the law of minimum. It is shown by picture, law of minimum, but taking into consideration other factors also. In this, they have considered other growth factors also, soil factor or biotic factor or abiotic factor. So you can see one by one. So in the beginning, there may be lack of moisture. Then moisture, you have applied the water. Then fertility may be low. Then you need to apply the nutrient. Then there may be poor stand of the crop. Then you can put some more seed. You can plant. Just these are hypothetical example. And then if you have overcome poor stand and so on, it will go on. So in the beginning, there may be one factor which will control the others, which is in least amount. So you can read it. Law of minimum states that the most limiting factor determines yield potential. Producers should minimize or eliminate the most limiting growth factor first, and if they have overcome the first, the next will become the limiting factor, and so on. It will go. Now you see another case. Just you see this picture. In this picture, they have taken one factor constant, the nitrogen supply, nitrogen input on the x-axis. Just see the x-axis where nitrogen input is there. So it is increasing towards right side. And on y-axis, you may consider it as a growth or yield. So in this case, you can see A. So here, limiting factors are water, phosphorus, and seeding rate. Again, hypothetical example. Here, the water, phosphorus, and seeding rate is limiting, but there is no limitation of nitrogen. So you will get yield A. So if you overcome one of them, suppose you have solved the problem of water, you have applied irrigation, but still your phosphorus and seeding rate are limited. They are in lowest quantity. Then you will get D. If you remove one deficiency of one factor, then next time you remove the deficiency of phosphorus also, then you will get more yield, the C. Now again you have removed seeding rate as a limitation, then you will get 100% yield. Maximum yield potential can be realized if you do not have any of these yield limiting factor. And it is not in case of minimum or lowest supply, but sometimes you have supply in excess also. Then how to, so this law of minimum can be extrapolated. This law can be extrapolated towards toxicity. So certain nutrients may be accumulated in more concentration than the required. Of course, it is not problem of limited or problem of less supply. It is problem of excess supply. So that way, we of course cannot call it law of maximum, but it can be extended to toxicity also, where concentration of a particular factor are more. Some water logging can happen, some factor can come in excess, some nutrient, maybe iron availability may be more, something like that, then it can be toxic. Now you see that most of the factors, as I told you before also, and they are having interaction. They have interacting effect. Like I have shown you fertilizer, water, and in soil you have temperature. Air temperature may be controlled by soil, air, and water, something like that. So most of these factors are interactive, and their effect on growth or yield is interactive effect. Means sometimes their interaction can be useful, sometimes their interaction can be unuseful. So such kind of things happen. See this case, potassium is at 95% level, phosphorus is suppose at 80% level, nitrogen is at about say 70% level, pest problem is say 90% level, and so on. They are different level, and one factor, that is temperature, is at optimum level. So these are different levels of the factors. Just very hypothetical example, and you can see their effect will be interactive, not additive. It is not additive. You cannot take average. So for example, there were 5 factors. Assume that there were 5 factors and each factor was at 100% level. So definitely you will get 100% yield. You will get 100% yield. But if there is deficiency, here each factor is not sufficient. Factor is not at a sufficient level. If 5 factors influence the yield and they are at 90%, each factor is at 90% level, then the yield will not be 90%. You cannot take the average. You need to multiply their levels. So 90, 90, 90, then it is 59%. So it is just to show you that these factors interact. If they do not interact, then you will get 90%. But if they are interacting, you will get 59% of the maximum possible yield, not 90%. Now, this was the law of minimum. Law of minimum is very fundamental to soil fertility. Now we can explain it further. We can extend it to the balanced fertilization. What is balanced fertilization? Means supplying all the essential nutrients in balanced amount, so that there is no deficiency of any single nutrient. And then it is this knowledge we are getting from law of minimum. So therefore, balanced fertilization being very important part of soil fertility management, therefore we can consider law of minimum as a very important principle of soil fertility. Number 2 is synchrony. Synchrony means the soil should be able to supply the nutrients as per requirement of the crop, as per demand of the crop. That is synchrony. So law of minimum is definitely, it is a kind of linear response if your factors are not limiting. It will say that it will go linear up to 100%. 100% if factors are not limited. But this synchrony means it needs to take into consideration the growth of the crop plant. The growth of the crop plant follows a sigmoid curve, or you can call it a parabolic curve, parabolic pattern of nutrient crop growth, which matches with the nutrient supply. Means at certain section of the growth, plant will require less nutrient. In certain stages, especially rapid growth phase, it will require more nutrients, and at maturity phase, it will require less nutrient. So the supply of the nutrients should be according to the requirement of the crop. That is known as synchrony. So in this case, you can see this example I have taken again from Haviland. Haviland's book, page number 348. You can see in detail. So you can see there are two lines. The first line, you can see this line which has circles, and you can see that in the beginning the uptake of nutrient, it is about nitrogen uptake. It is nitrogen uptake. In the beginning, you can see nitrogen uptake is slow, but then very fast. The uptake is very fast. The increase is uptake in uptake is very fast. Then the slows down. Total uptake is increasing, but the rate of uptake is slowing down. It is just like your law of diminishing return, if you remember that line. And it is also kind of quadratic response, or it is also known as parabolic curve. So you can see this pattern. So in this picture, it is also shown how this nitrate availability is important. Nitrogen availability is important. It should match the requirement of the crop. Here they have tried to match it by applying nitrogen at this particular point. I cannot show you, maybe pointer at this point. You can see this arrow. Here you need to apply nitrogen because here the growth is more. The rate of growth is very fast. So plant need more nitrates. So here one should apply nitrogen. So this is how people manipulate the rate, the nutrient availability, so that it matches with the requirement of the crop. And to this, people are, why we are going for a split application, applying nitrogen 2 times, 3 times in the crop. Normally we say that apply at branching stage or vegetative stage, then just before flowering apply nitrogen. Now people are applying nitrogen in cereals at flowering stage also. They are recommending like this. So there is a split application of nitrogen just to coincide with the requirement. Where you have more requirement, then the supply should not be less. It should match the requirement. That is the purpose. Why people are going for nitrogen management through leaf color chart or through the SPAD meter. Just the basic objective is to supply nutrient as per the need. Where you have more need, apply more nutrient. Where you have less need, apply less nutrient. So therefore, this synchrony, principle of synchrony of uptake and supply is also a fundamental principle of soil fertility. Now third is nutrient cycling. Nutrient cycling means the nutrients which are removed from the soil, they should come back to the soil. How nutrients are removed from the soil? One is they are taken by the crop. Second, they are lost. They are lost by erosion. They are lost by leaching or some other mechanism. And thirdly, it is not that all the nutrients which are removed by the crop will be removed from the soil. Some of them are retained in the soil in the form of root, in the form of litter fall is there. And also some farmers apply organic manure back into the soil. And also then certain fertilizers are also applied back into the soil. So overall, it is just input and output. Whatever you take out from the soil, output, that should be brought back to the soil. This is your nutrient cycling. This is known as nutrient cycling. And nutrient management is actually nutrient cycling. If you think it deeply, nutrient management is nutrient cycling, bringing back the nutrients in the form of fertilizer, in the form of biological nitrogen fixation, or in the form of your fertilizer application, manure application, crop residue, all this. So nutrient cycling happens, and in this, the role of decomposition is very, very important because it releases, it makes the nutrients available. Thus, I can conclude that these three important principles are very, very important in soil fertility management. Law of minimum, principle of synchrony, and principle of nutrient cycling. Now, the second part of this lecture is soil fertility or nutrient supply versus crop response. This has been very, very important subject since the very beginning. That how much should be the level of nutrient in the soil so that we get maximum response from the crop. What should be the ideal rate of application of fertilizer? What should be the ideal available phosphorus in soil, available potassium in soil? nitrogen in soil, micronutrient in soil, and what is the relationship of nutrient availability in the soil and the plant growth. This has been very important subject. Response means the change due to change in input. How much is the change in output due to unit change in input? This is fertilizer or maybe nutrient is input. So how much change is there in the crop response due to 1 kg, say nitrogen, phosphorus, or potash? That is your response. Response can be measured in terms of your growth or photosynthesis or dry matter or yield or maybe any yield attributing parameter. There are many ways to measure the response, crop response. So how this nutrient supply affects the crop response. So you can see this kind of line you can see here where nutrient concentration in the plant tissue. See on the x-axis it is nutrient concentration in the plant tissue. On y-axis it is the plant yield. So see the relationship between these two. So on x-axis nutrient concentration is increasing towards right side. You see it is increasing. And then in the beginning your nutrient is deficient in the soil because the level in deficient in the plant, so growth is less. You can see the growth is less, and if the deficiency level continues but it is increasing, it is deficient but deficiency continue to decrease, then it comes to the critical range. Critical range is the level of nutrient where you get 90% of the maximum growth. So here critical range is a transition zone from deficiency will be converted to sufficiency, and then sufficient level, and you continue to increase the concentration of the nutrient in the tissue towards right side. Then certain nutrients can become more toxic also. They are accumulated in excess, and then once they are in excess, the growth reduces. So growth is maximum where you have sufficient level of nutrient starts to begin. You start to begin immediately after critical range. Once your critical range is over, you go beyond the critical range, then you get sufficient level of nutrient in the plant tissue, and there you get the maximum response or maximum yield. You can also see one Steenberg effect here. Steenberg, it was named behind the scientist, and I have taken from Haviland book, page number 13. So you can see Steenberg effect is under severe deficiency. You see on the x-axis, when you move towards right, in the left side, it is more deficient because concentration of the nutrient in the tissue is very less. So under severe deficiency, rapid increase in yield with added nutrient can cause a small decrease in nutrient concentration. Means it was hungry, the plant was hungry actually, and it was having a certain amount of nutrient in it, but you have suddenly increased the supply of the nutrient, then it takes up more and grow very fast. So in comparison to nutrient concentration, its growth is very rapid, more rapid than the uptake. So in that case, dilution effect happen, and because of dilution, the concentration of a particular nutrient is lower in the plant. This is known as Steenberg effect. Now in detail you can see this is the picture, and this is by Fink. Fink is very famous to write a soil fertility book in pictures. He has written in German language, all pictures. So you can see on the x-axis you have nutrient supply in soil or in plant. Nutrient supply in soil or in plant. On the left side you have your y-axis where it is increasing growth or yield. So you see on the x-axis the concentration is increasing. See on y-axis you see range of deficiency. Here in the beginning the nutrient levels are very low. So nutrient is the plant is showing acute deficiency. Deficiency symptoms are visible here in acute deficiency. Then you further increase the supply of nutrient in soil or in plant. In plant can be increased only when you increase supply in soil. If you cannot separate them. If you have more supply of nutrient in soil, you can have more supply of nutrient in the tissue. So then you make the more supply in the soil and plant, then plant may or may not show you deficiency symptoms. It is known as hidden deficiency, and in this zone you have critical value of the nutrient. You can remember that concentration of nutrient in soil or plant where you get 90% of the maximum possible yield is called as critical value or critical nutrient concentration. I repeat, the concentration of a particular nutrient in plant and soil where you have 90% of the maximum possible yield in terms of growth is known as critical concentration in plant or in soil for deficiency. This critical concentration for deficiency. Then you go beyond this critical concentration, you further increase. So then it will be optimum supply where you get maximum growth. Certain nutrients, you still increase the nutrient concentration. Then there may be luxury consumption for potassium, and you continue to increase the concentration. Then if you have micronutrients like iron or aluminum or molybdenum, you can have their toxicity. Light toxicity means symptoms may not be visible, but in acute toxicity, symptoms may be visible and growth will be adversely affected. Here you will also have a critical value for toxicity, critical value or critical concentration for toxicity, which again can be defined in the same way. Critical level of toxicity means the higher concentration of nutrient or nutrient concentration in plant or soil, where there is 10% reduction in growth or where you get 90% of the maximum possible yield. This is known as critical concentration for toxicity in plant or in soil. So they are different supply levels. Actually, on x-axis, you have different supply level of nutrient in the soil or different contents of nutrient in the plant. So they are defined. I think you can see it. Acute deficiency, definite visible symptoms, poor growth. Marginal, small range with or without visible symptoms. Optimum supply, you get the maximum possible yield. And luxury consumption, I think you understand in case of potassium, it is not toxic. It is just waste of resources, but it is not toxic. Marginal or light toxicity, moving toward toxicity. The acute toxicity, excessive supply of nutrient, plant damaged by toxic levels. You can see this critical concentration by FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization. So critical concentration is determined. The knowledge is already available. People have already fixed the critical levels. I think students from soil science understand better. They know that critical level for different nutrients in soil as well as in plant. So for example, for plant, the critical level will be different for different species. The wheat will have different critical level than oilseed. This is number one. The critical level for a specific nutrient or for different nutrient will be different. It will vary with the crop. It will also vary with the nutrient. Number two. Number three, it will vary with the stage of the crop. Within the one crop, you can have different stages where you will have different critical concentrations. Number four, the plant part which has been sampled. Plant part which you are sampling will also decide the critical level. So it has been already specified that this part, this leaf, petiole or leaf blade of this particular plant should be used. So there are four factors which affect the critical concentration. Number one, species of the plant. Number two, kind of nutrient. Number three, stage of sampling. And number four, plant part which was sampled. So based upon all these four, you can see for nitrogen, the wheat and rice, the critical concentration is 3%. 3% nitrogen at you can see the different growth stages. Growth stage and plant parts use 1 to 2 node, means it is at almost seedling stage. Seedling stage, shoots, in shoots it should be 3%. So you can see this table in detail. Try to understand it, try to do the interpretation of this slide. This is from FAO, this is from Yoshida, Rice book. You can see Critical concentration are different for deficiency as well as toxicity. This is one point. Number 2 point, which plant part was analyzed? And number 3 is the growth stage. The growth stage. So all these you can see these variables. So thank you very much, and I end this class here, and I also end the recording. If we were successful, stop recording. So thank you. I can those who want to leave, tell me.